Hi, this is John from FlatCatGear, and what you're looking at is my backyard. I live in northern Los Angeles, and behind me you can see there are the San Gabriel Mountains in the Angeles National Forest. So my topic today is about fire safety, and fire safety is really close to me right now because I live in a high fire zone. Los Angeles always has wildfires almost every year. We had a large wildfire just over those mountain ridges, and from my house I could see the flames at night. I live up in the canyons. In the canyons, there's special laws. You can't smoke a cigarette in your car because of the fire danger. They also have arson patrols throughout the area, so there's a high sensitivity in certain parts of Southern California for fires. The number one factor for setting up a safe kitchen is being out of the wind. Wind does a number of things. Number one, wind is an accelerant. So your fuel will burn faster, your fuel will burn hotter, and it'll create a larger flame. So getting your kitchen out of the wind is the number one priority. Now, when a lot of people set up their campsites, the first thing they look at is, oh, where can I set my tent? You know, where is there water? Well, your tent's never going to set a forest on fire. So the number one priority in picking a spot is where is the safest, best place that I can set up my kitchen. Like I said, wind is a factor, so you want to get out of the wind. So how much is too wind? Well, here's a quick example. If you've got a windscreen and you set your windscreen up and the windscreen rolls away, you probably got too much wind at your site and you need to find a better spot. Now, how much work does it take? It takes a fair amount of work. Just as much work as setting up the right tent. You got to find a big enough spot. You got to find, it's got to be flat and level. Well, setting up your kitchen is no different. I got to find a place that's out of the wind. It's got to be safe. And that's the amount of work it takes. So if you want to go backpacking, do the work and find a safe spot for your kitchen. So you think you found a wind sheltered site. I've got some boulders here. I've got a wind block. It looks pretty good. There's a couple things to keep in mind, and I did a couple of videos on this earlier. The effect of the wind is much more significant 3 feet off the ground than it is right on the ground. So do me a favor, just set up your stove on the ground. Because once it's set up on the ground, it's not going to fall off. If you recall the Hewlett fire out in Colorado, if you looked at what the camper said, he said he put his stove on a rock and he just turned away for a second and it blew off and started this big fire. Well, if it's on the ground, you're going to be in a much safer spot. So just keep your stuff on the ground. Don't put it on a table. Keep it on the ground. If you're concerned about fire safety, we just don't recommend using a stove with an integrated pot stand like the one shown here. This is a cat can stove. Another one is some of the bottle stoves. The diameters are just so small that they're just not as stable. Make sure the ground is clear of debris. Even though it looks like there's not much there, if you look at all the twigs that are in this area, there is more energy stored in those twigs than what you're going to put in your stove. The forestry recommends a 5-foot radius around your cooking area. One thing that's going to help you out is really knowing your gear inside and out. One of the things that just drives me crazy is, hearing stories about people who are going out for the first time trying a stove and, it's like, oh, gee, it made this noise, it made this pop. The best thing you can do is take the gear you're going to go out with and try it 10, 20 times, get a good feel for what's going to happen. Now, related to gear is what kind of gear you select. There's a couple kinds of stoves that I just are philosophically opposed to, and those stoves are the ones that have an external priming pan or an external wick. Conceptually, the idea of putting alcohol on the outside of a stove to get it to preheat faster just goes against the grain of what I think is safe or important. So particularly during high fire seasons, I recommend not using those kind of stoves. And getting to know your gear, the other thing that's important is things as simple as a fuel bottle. Now, this is a big fuel bottle because when I go out, I take lots of gear with me and do a lot of testing. But what it has is a flip top. So what's nice is you can get the fuel into the stove. One of the things that I just don't care for is people will take soda cans and they'll unscrew the lid and they'll pour it in. You just don't have that kind of control that you do with something that's got a flip top lid. So get to know your gear, get used to it, and feel comfortable using it. Okay, the next tip, they're all common sense. Use a heat shield. A heat shield will put a barrier between your stove and the ground, and it's just safer. It all makes sense. While you're doing that, keep a bottle of water near your fire. Water will help dilute the alcohol and get the flames out faster. Don't store your stove near your fire. Put it well away. If you're concerned about it's really hot and dry and such, you got the water, put some water on the ground under your heat shield before you start. I've got my water in my pot, I've lit my stove, I know how much alcohol it's going to use. I put my stove over my windscreen, leave it there and let it burn out. If you know your stove, like I said earlier, you know your stove, you know your equipment, you know how much fuel it's going to take to boil the water. While it's boiling and burning, on the bottom you've got an aluminum heat shield, you've got a windscreen around it, and you've got a pot on top. So you have metal enclosing the entire flame surfaces. That's the safest way to be. Speaking of that, knowing your equipment is use an efficient stove. Now, some of the stoves that drive me crazy because they're the easiest ones to make are the can stove and the bottle stove. Well, nice stoves, but they're not that efficient. Those stoves take between 3/4 of an ounce and an ounce to boil 2 cups of water. A good efficient stove will only take a half an ounce. So the less alcohol that you have to put in your stove, the safer you're going to be. Okay, so I've given you a bunch of things to think about, a bunch of tips and tricks on how to make things safer. There's one bottom line. You get out there, you're getting ready to cook your meal. If you do not feel comfortable and confident that you are safe, don't start a fire. That is absolutely the bottom line. You have to be comfortable and confident and know that you're safe before you should start. If not, back off and rethink where you're at. Come visit us at www.FlatCatGear.com.